Here on the ground, change happens fast. Problems feel frequent and urgent. It's loud and anxiety runs high. From a satellite view, the Earth looks the same as it did thousands of years ago. We've been here before. Let's learn from our past and shoot for a better future.
On a busy news day, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. Prosecutors right now are offering a redacted version of Special Counsel Jack Smith's filing. That had to be made public today. It was in this newly unsealed court paper. We're learning that former President Trump resorted to crimes in a bid to cling to power after the 2020 election.
That is from Fox News. Neil Cavuto reporting on Fox News. I believe that was on Wednesday or Thursday of this last week. Welcome to this episode of A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mikkelson, your host, speaking at you from Sunday, October 6th, 2024 in the space and time continuum. That's one of the major things that happened in the last week. Now, I did a little promo a couple days ago, and I mentioned that, wow, what a week again. I took last weekend off. Took a trip to Washington, D.C., just for fun. Heidi and I, we met up with Doug, my friend, who often interacts with this show and gives me ideas even. We had a blast, took a break from doing the show. I can't even remember what happened that week before that. I mean, this report that we just heard from Neil Cavuto, to me feels like it happened a couple weeks ago. You know, I noticed on my Twitter, for instance, on my Twitter, I mark things that I think are important news items and I review them. Going down this, there was a lot. There was a lot just in the last few days because of so many news events. One thing that is happening that I don't really like is that we've kind of lost our focus on what's going on with the candidates. Haven't seen a lot of clips of Kamala Harris and or Tim Walz, although Tim Walz went on Fox News just this morning. And he is back to being Tim Walz. We were a little worried over the debate, which just happened a few days ago, by the way. God, that seems like I actually being in Washington, D.C. just last weekend, to me, seems like a couple weeks ago. The weeks are getting along because they're stuffed, jam-packed with so many things. It's hard to believe that, 5 of these major things happened in the last 3 days. Talking about what Neil Cavuto was talking about, though, this report put out by Jack Smith, it is asking the court, a couple weeks ago, I put out my revised report. We're still keeping the 4 major indictments about the Washington, D.C. It's basically the January 6th, blocking the results of the 2020 election. I feel a little out of practice. Do I sound scattered? My brain feels a little scattered. A lot to keep track of here. So this is the DOJ, the government, the American government, the United States government, Justice Department asking the court, Judge Chutkan's court, please look at all of this evidence, and I urge you to rule that all of this included in this report is not immune because it is not presidential activities. It's usually the activity of the candidate, Donald Trump, not the president, Donald Trump, including how he is hounding Mike Pence and threatening him. 70-some threats saying, if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, whether it's legal or not, I don't care. I don't care. So what? So what? Just do it. Or, Mike, I'm going to have to talk back. I'm going to have to say that you didn't do the right thing. I'm going to sick the crowd on you, which, of course, he did. They were yelling, hang Mike Pence. And when Mike Pence had to get taken away to safety to a bunker somewhere underneath the Capitol, somebody told Donald Trump that was happening. Hey, the Secret Service really is fearing for your vice president's life right now and had to move him to a secure bunker. Trump said, so what? That's something new in this report. Also, an aide of Donald Trump, when somebody was saying, hey, things are getting a little out of hand out there, by the Capitol building, one of Trump's aides said, "Make them riot. Make it happen." That's another thing we didn't previously know. It's like we're not surprised because Trump is not a human being. He's a monster. But yet we're still surprised. It's just, the fire hose of feces. And sadly, that's why so much of this stuff is being missed. This is such a major story. And it's coming out so close to the election. Yet we're not even focusing on it. There was a huge hurricane, over 200 people dead. That's a huge news as well. Normally we get these, in the past, we get these stories kind of one at a time, but now, that's a natural disaster. And we have all these different political stories, story upon story upon story. It's frustrating. And that's why we're not hearing much about the actual campaigns right now, because there's just no room in the news cycle. Now, of course, the vice presidential debate probably wasn't going to mean much anyway. It really never does. Tim Walz didn't, he didn't perform as himself. Looked like he had too many things stuffed in his head he was trying to remember, so he was unable to be natural about talking. So he wasn't his normal self that everybody seems to have grown to love. Then this morning on Fox News, he didn't just get interviewed somewhere. He got interviewed on Fox News, and he did a great job. He was barraged with gotcha question after gotcha question. And he did a great job. He did his normal Tim Walz job. So that's all cool. And the debate itself, if anything stood out, it was in Tim Walz's favor when he asked J.D. Vance to admit that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. J.D. Vance wouldn't do it. He came back with some BS, and Tim Walz said, "That sounds like a damning non-answer." And that's the main thing that made the news, prompting more talk about how Donald Trump won't admit that he lost in 2020. There were other Republican elected officials going on TV this morning, all of them being asked that question, none of them answering it. So that's a good thing. Here's another thing that is a really important story. Biden, there's a headline in the Washington Post, how Biden helped end a port strike that threatened Democrats in November. Bob Seska on Twitter corrects that, and he said this headline should be, how Biden helped end a port strike, saving the economy again. This was a strike of longshore workers. It was really political because the leader of the union that these guys were under is a Trump guy, and he turned down a really good deal because he wanted this strike to happen. This was threatening vegetables and fruits and cars. It was threatening the supply chain of things like that into the United States. It could have caused another supply chain problem. It could have really hurt the economy, and it looked pretty bad. Pete Buttigieg, under Joe Biden, took care of it, stopped it. They made a deal. Here's another Washington Post headline. No, Biden didn't take FEMA relief money to use on migrants, but Trump did. This is another huge story. You see how, these are all huge stories, not to mention the economic report. 254,000 jobs added. 4.1% unemployment. It's been low, the lowest consistently for more than 50 years. Wages up 4%. 2.5% inflation. Lower than anyone expects kind of ever. And polls show that people are listening because Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are now even. I don't know why Donald Trump has any credibility with the economy, but Kamala Harris has closed the gap. Because when people are being polled, and you know how I feel about polls, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, like we always end up talking about. There are more discrepancies to be pointed out. But these polls are getting more and more consistent, partially because we're getting closer and closer to the election. And some of the polls are being a little bit more poignant on certain issues. On the economy, Trump no longer has his lead in that he would handle it better. He's lost that. And now after this new jobs report and all of these things I just mentioned, it's going to go even more in that direction. That was threatened by this strike, this longshoremen strike. Now, talking about FEMA, this is Olivia Troy. She worked as a Homeland Security advisor in the Trump White House. Now, we're talking about Hurricane Helene, which just raged havoc in places people weren't even expecting. Way inland, Western North Carolina is devastated in a way nobody really predicted. Donald Trump is clueless to this. He said, nobody even saw this storm coming. It's really late in the season. No, it's not. If anything, we're more toward the beginning of the season than the end. Idiot. Here's what Olivia Troy writes on Twitter. Let me be very clear. As a Homeland Security advisor in the Trump White House, I witnessed firsthand how Donald Trump politicized disaster relief, leaving devastated Americans waiting for help. Leaders across the country and government were calling my office, desperate for action as Trump failed them in moments of crisis. Today, he's once again failing Americans by distorting the facts and spreading lies. The reality, the Biden-Harris administration is stepping up in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene with decisive leadership and a swift, effective response. That's the truth, while Donald Trump and other Republicans are trying to say that Biden and Harris are diverting funds to migrants to pay for them to stay in luxury hotels in New York City. It's all lies. Here's Jessica Tarlov from Fox News commenting on that.
Marco Rubio didn't like something, so he said that it was fake. And the reality is, and I mentioned this yesterday on The Five, that every accusation is a confession from the Republicans. You know, the only president who actually did take funds that were supposed to go to disaster relief and move them to dealing with the border, that was Donald Trump.
It was Defense
he
Department
took $155 million out of the FEMA budget to do that. That should have gone to hurricane relief.
A couple of things.
You can hear there the other people on her show going, wait a minute. Because they know that that's true and they don't want it to be said on TV. Okay, so where are we here in the list? Project 2025. If you talk about cutting funds for hurricane relief, Project 2025 wants to do away with NOAA, the National Oceanic something. They're the people who watch and predict. They're the ones who have all the radars out, who can see the storm, who can tell us where the storm is going. They have, I would say, the most accurate predictions. Predictions are really difficult after this global warming mess we're in. The storms, they go up, they go down, they go left, they go right really quickly. But NOAA is our best way of tracking them and telling people, hey, brace yourself. Right now, this storm is at a level 3 and it's going to hit your town. Project 2025 wants to get rid of NOAA completely. They want to get rid of the National Weather Service. What? They want to cut drastically funds for FEMA. FEMA was began 25 years ago or so. They're the main way now that we get in after hurricanes. They were formed after all these changes were beginning. One of the first major efforts that FEMA was a part of was in New Orleans in 2005 with Katrina. Project 2025 wants to cut that. Right now, we have another hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico on its way to Florida, and it's going to be a hurricane by the time it gets to Florida. It's going to ravish Florida. Ravage. It's going to ravage. It's going to ravage Florida. Project 2025, if Trump and the Republicans have their way, we won't even be able to see that coming. We wouldn't even know it was happening. They don't care about people. They care about power. It's crazy. I don't understand it because, I don't know, without these things, I don't know how they think they can survive either. I'm going to mention something about Project 2025 in the next segment. We are due for a break, though. I told you in the promo that I made a few days ago, whether you saw it or not, that I was going to solidify some of my predictions. I have 4 predictions that I'm going to make official when we come back on a satellite view.
Donald Trump is not hiding his plan. Donald Trump has said, don't worry about getting out the vote. He has said over and over again that he is not worried about getting people to vote. He is only worried about getting enough bodies in his voter suppression operation. They have had a clear 3-part strategy now for months. They are going to try to make it harder for people to vote. They are doing that in court every day. They are going to file challenges and do purges and harass election officials. We are seeing that. And they are going to challenge certification afterwards. That is all that Donald Trump cares about. He does not think that he can get out enough voters to win this election. You know why, Brian? Because he can't get out enough voters to win this election. The fact is he lost the popular vote by 3 million votes in 2016. He lost it by 7 million votes in 2020. He will again lose the popular vote in an epic landslide.
That is Mark Elias. He's talking on the Brian Tyler Cohen show, which is on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. It's a really good show, by the way. Has really great guests. Mark Elias, by the way, is working for the Kamala Harris campaign. He is the leader in fighting against all of the things you heard him mention here that Republicans are doing to cheat. When you hear, like we heard Jessica Tarloff say, whatever Trump says is what he is doing. It's projection. It's a confession. Trump says they can't win unless they cheat. He's talking about himself. Some of these numbers that Mark talks about, I'm going to talk about in my predictions. I'm going to keep you hanging, though. They're talking about a lack of ground game. The ground game will win in this election. People on both sides, people who know how elections work, I've heard them just this week. Republicans saying whoever has the best ground game is going to win this election. Kamala Harris, we've listened to past shows. The staggering amount of offices she has open across the country, especially in the swing states. The intense amount of volunteers who have signed up over the excitement of the Harris-Walz campaign. They're hitting the ground. They have a huge ground game. Here in Minnesota, in my district, we didn't have a Democrat representing Congress in CD3 until Dean Phillips came in 2018. Last time was in 1959, 60 years earlier. Now, Kelly Morrison is running for that seat. She will win. And she has been my senator here. I've never had a Democrat representing me in St. Paul in my life, living in this district. The state house, I still haven't had a representative in the Minnesota State House represent me here where I live. Tracy Brazil is going to be the first one when she wins in November. But this has been a very red zone. We don't get help from the Democratic Party out here. Mailers. So many, 8 maybe? Mailers put out by the Minnesota DFL, which is the Minnesota Democratic Party, targeting my district in favor, of course, of our candidates. The Harris-Walz bus tour came to our district. Tracy Brazil, Kelly Morrison, some other local candidates were supported by people, and then a mass door knock. Gwen Walz was there at the event, just very close to me here. This is what's going on in the ground game in the Harris-Walz campaign. Trump Nothing. Republican activists are worried. They're hitting the hot button. What is going on? Why is nobody door knocking for Donald Trump? Why is there no ground game going on for Donald Trump? Who wins the ground game wins the election. Here's a guy who door knocks to find just information, basically. Let me find it here. This is really interesting. Listen to this guy. This is Dr. Zeke Taylor talking on this little clip here.
So Tony and I just got done knocking 48 doors in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Majority, if not all, independent Republican libertarian doors, overwhelmingly positive. Would you agree?
Yeah, not only was it overwhelmingly positive, but I was surprised how many people actually answered the door.
Yeah.
Usually people aren't home, but we had like an 80% rate of people being home, and they were all very friendly and willing to listen and talk. Some really good conversations.
Yeah, like this gentleman. Take a listen. I'm here in King of Prussia with Richard, a 77-year-old registered Republican who's going to be voting for Kamala Harris and all the Democrats up and down the ballot. I just want to say thank you so much. And what's driving you to vote for Kamala Harris as a registered Republican?
Well, I think if you look at what he says and what he does, I think you have to take it at face value. And obviously a narcissist, and he just doesn't stand for anything that I stand for.
Thank you, everyone who's getting out the vote in Pennsylvania and all over the country. Let's not take any vote for granted. When we fight,
we win.
That's right.
Okay, that's Dr. Zeke Taylor. He's just a guy going door knocking to asking people who they're going to vote for. He's not even really pushing for it, but he's gathering information. He's been door knocking since April. He's door knocked 1,700 doors in Pennsylvania, and he feels very confident that Pennsylvania is going to go for Kamala Harris. He talks to independents, Republicans, what else did he say? Libertarians. He doesn't talk to Democrats. He's talking to registered Republicans. And he's having an overwhelming response of people saying, no, I can't vote for Trump. I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris. This is insane. It's incredible. Another thing happened this week. 400 economists signed a letter. It's probably more than that by now, saying, please don't let Donald Trump into the White House. He will ruin the American economy. Kamala Harris has really great plans to improve our economy even more than she and Joe Biden have been improving it over the last 4 years. I mentioned the incredible report that just came out, 3 days ago? 254,000 jobs. Nobody thought there was going to be that many jobs added. All the things Donald Trump says, I'm going to bring back manufacturing. Biden brought back manufacturing. 800,000 manufacturing jobs. Trump lost like 280,000 manufacturing jobs when he was president. You can say it was because of the pandemic, but hey, man, that's on him too. That happened during his presidency. Also, we're talking about the ground game. What about being interviewed? What about exposure on television? 60 Minutes, every election cycle, has both presidential candidates, the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate, right about now before the election, about a month before the election. Donald Trump turned it down. If you're going to fact check me, I'm not going to go on your TV show. They don't want to be fact checked. That was another huge gaffe that J.D. Vance made in the debate. The rules were you weren't going to fact check me. And now you're fact checking me by pointing out that I'm lying. Donald Trump is not going to be on the 60 Minutes show this Monday or Tuesday. I think it's Monday. If you're listening to this, it'll probably be like tonight or last night or something like that. It's going to be Monday, the 7th of October. Kamala Harris is going to be on the show. She didn't turn it down. Trump is holding up any chance of any more debates. Kamala Harris is not holding those up. Trump is. Fox News said the Harris campaign is ready to debate on Fox News. Trump is holding it up. Trump has said he's not going to do it. He's not running a campaign. Like you heard Mark Elias say, he just wants to do all these cheating maneuvers. He expects to lose big. Now, we mentioned Project 2025. the Lincoln Project thought of something that I had not thought of, which makes a lot of sense. Like, you wonder if Trump can even survive until Election Day, much less his presidency. This is a little more than a minute long. Just listen to this.
You're in trouble, Donald. In the courts, in the streets, in your own party. But there's one big problem you never saw coming. Turn around. He's right behind you. It's JD. His billionaire friends mock you. Why do you think they forced JD Vance on you? Age is getting to you, Donald, and you're just too slow to see the plan. If you win, JD will come for you. You won't see him until it's too late. He won't wait until you make a mistake. JD's plot to invoke the 25th Amendment is already underway. Your cabinet betrayed you before. Why would it be different now? And with Democrats in the majority, no one will stop him. Republicans want someone younger, smarter, someone stable. A leader who will execute Project 2025 without your problems. Rupert's Wall Street Journal said Vance's version of Trump is better than the real thing. JD switched from never Trump hater to your running mate in record time. You thought that was real? You think he won't stab you in the back to seize 10 years of power in the White House? So yes, Donald, they really are out to get you, and the one who'll betray your presidency is right by your side.
Chilling. Especially if you're Donald Trump. I wonder if he's seen it. I'm sure they're doing everything they can to make sure he doesn't see it. J.D. Vance will be president of the United States. He's got no qualifications whatsoever to do so. He's done nothing in the Senate. He's got nothing in his life that he's ever done that would qualify him to be president. He's not qualified to be a senator. He's done nothing. He's just a power-grabbing freak. And he will let these other scary Nazis who wrote Project 2025, he will let them run the country while he just sits in the White House and goes on TV and has the moniker of the President of the United States to stand behind. That makes total sense. And I love how they have a young woman's voice. You know, it's like Trump is like, "Ugh, she sounds hot." But then she's saying, "You're too old, Donald. You move too slow to see it coming." What? She's being mean to me? I can't handle that. I mean, I thought we were going to date. Yeah, the Lincoln Project has done a few things with that. Probably the same woman doing the voiceover. I think it's just masterful. But it's pretty scary to think about. J.D. Vance hated Donald Trump. J.D. Vance called Donald Trump the American Hitler. Now he's the running mate. She says in this piece, "You thought that was real?" We were all fooled. It's amazing. We've got just a couple minutes more. I'm going to talk about polling. Now, Kamala Harris is doing really well in the polls. Polls are skewed by these fake, they're not even fake, they're just really bad polls. One of them in particular is run by two high school teenage boys. There's another one called a right-wing Twitter poll that's called SoCal, South Cal, S-O-Cal. And Nate Silver, he includes these polls in his averages. These polls just say Donald Trump's going to win by 90%. So they bring the average, they skew the averages. And even with those, in those averages, Kamala Harris is doing really well. She's running ahead in all but Arizona of the swing states in these kind of what I consider not accurate polls. You've heard me say it before. If she's ahead by 3 points in these polls, then she's ahead by 5 to 7 points in reality. You've heard me a couple weeks ago talk about the mind-blowing amounts of voter registrations going on with people who always vote for Democrats. These are people who were not previously registered to vote, so they're not part of any poll of registered voters. They're not part of any poll of most likely voters. However, they are the most likely voters. But they're not part of the polls because They weren't even registered. They've never voted. They're not considered a likely voter. But if they're just registering now, that means they're excited to vote. They are the most likely voter. Everyone's minds are going to be blown by the results because the polls are just not reading it right. Go back and listen to past shows about where I get information that I convey on this show to you from better sources than that. That's what's going on in polls. There are a lot of polls also, this is very interesting, even in these polls, in states like Florida, Trump is not up to 50% in those polls. Even if he's ahead of Kamala, he's not up to 50%. That means that these people, we don't know how they're going to vote, could go for Kamala and win places like Florida and Texas and Ohio, who overwhelmingly voted in favor of women's reproductive health care rights. That kicked the hornet's nest. That woke the sleeping giant, the Dobbs decision. That issue is going to be just as important as it was in 2022 in this election. In Florida, they have the measure on the ballot. It's going to, I think, overwhelmingly produce Democrats to go to the polls, some who may not have. It's going to really get out the Democratic vote. In places like Florida, there are 7 states that have this measure on the ballot, trying to save women's lives by saving their reproductive health care rights. That's going to be, I believe, kind of a mind-blowing factor. You heard Mark Elias say, this is going to be a landslide. He said, epic landslide. Let's go to my predictions. He was talking about the popular vote. I, in the past, and what I'm doing is solidifying some of these. I, in the past, said I think that she's going to, well, I said Biden was going to win the election by 10 million votes this time. He won it by 7 million in 2020. Hillary won it by 3 million in 2016. In the past, Obama has won the popular vote by 5 million. Now, when you win by that much, you also win the Electoral College. My prediction on the popular vote, Kamala will win by 11 million votes in the popular vote. I am predicting and solidifying my prediction that Kamala Harris will also win more than 300 electoral votes. You need 270 to win. I think she will win over 300. And I kind of feel like I'm being a chicken on that because you heard me last show talk about Tom Miller, who has been correct about many, many things, seeing a path for her to win over 400 electoral votes. I had found that path as well. It doesn't seem crazy for her to get over 400 electoral votes. But I'm going to predict she will get definitely over 300 electoral votes. It's not going to be like she's at 276 and he's at, 263 or whatever. She's going to get over 300 electoral votes. I believe quite a bit more than that. I do believe this is going to be an incredible landslide. And of course, one of the predictions that I'm saying, of course, is obvious that the Harris-Walz campaign wins and Kamala Harris will become the next president of the United States, with Tim Walz being her vice president. My fourth prediction I'm putting into solidifying category, that the Democrats will regain the House of Representatives and the Democrats will keep the Senate. You're going to hear everybody say it's a really close election. The Democrats have no chance of keeping the Senate. These are the predictions I'm making from all of the information I get. A Reuters Ipsos poll, which is one of the more accurate ones, Harris leads 47-40. And on the economy, Trump only leads by 2%, 43-41. That was, I believe, more than a week ago. Those numbers are likely better now. So that Reuters Ipsos has Harris leading nationally, 47-40. There are other polls where it's like 52-46. Polls where she's consistently leading by 5, 6, 7 points. And people are still saying it's on a razor's edge. If she's winning by 5 to 7 points and they say it's within the margin of error, that's not a poll worth listening to whatsoever. That's a horrible poll. So if you hear that, don't worry about it. Thank you so much for listening. I'm having fun being back behind the mic here. I missed you guys last week. We will be back here next week. But until then, when you're listening to the news, remember this information that I just went through with you. We're going to keep each other sane in this crazy election cycle. It's going extremely well for us. The Republicans are scared. One more thing I was going to mention is, you know how they said, there's the secret Trump vote. People are afraid to admit on the phone to pollsters that they're going to vote for Trump. That went on in 2016 and 2020. I believe it's opposite now. I believe there are a lot of Republicans who are afraid to admit that they are planning on voting for Kamala Harris. A lot of those people are in Congress. A show or two ago, I talked about how there was reporting that elected Republican officials hope that Trump loses because they need to wipe the slate clean and start all over again. That's what Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger think. That's why they're taking the route they're taking. Liz Cheney did not throw away her political career by going against Trump. She solidified her political career and the future of it by going against Trump. She's going to be left standing. Ted Cruz and those idiots are going to be gone. Ted Cruz is behind currently in his election in Texas. And again, I say, who's going to vote against Ted Cruz and then vote for Donald Trump in Texas? Ted Cruz's race is a statewide Texas race. He's behind. I think that's a canary in the coal mine kind of hint about how the up ticket is going to go. And that's the kind of scenario that Tom Miller is talking about, where Kamala Harris gets over 400 electoral votes, winning places like Texas and Florida. People talk about Iowa and how she's just a couple points behind in Iowa. It's getting crazy fun. This week was not as fun. Hurricanes. But hey, man, most of it was very positive. And we're going to see more of the campaign here on in. We're going to see more of Kamala Harris. We're going to see Donald Trump shoving people away. The more people see of him, the more they hate him. He's losing his own followers. There I go again. I started talking. I said we were going to end the show, didn't I? All right. Thank you so much for listening. We're going to help keep each other sane. We're going to stick together. And this is going to be a great month and a great election day. Thank you so much for listening. We'll speak at you next week.
You've been listening to A Satellite View with Todd Mikkelson. Go to toddmikkelson.com for links and more information.